Tonight, which is the 12th of April, the 7th day of the Hebrew month of Nisan, we will enter into the Shabbos, which is the last Shabbos before the great holiday of Pesach, the first Jewish holiday, the first sacred day of celebration, celebrating the actual birth and becoming of a nation of the Jewish people through our exodus on the way to receiving the Torah and eventually inheriting the land of Canaan, the Holy Land of Israel. And it is customary to refer to this Shabbos with a special name. It's called Shabbat Hagadol, the Great Shabbos. There's many variety of explanations why it is called that. But the tradition that has been imbued in the Shabbos goes beyond these specific explanations. And it is simply a great Shabbos, a very important Shabbos. The Rebbe of Lubavitch always used to say that Shabbat Hagadol is a joint word, and it should be greatness in the concept of Shabbos itself. But there's a very unusual custom regarding the Shabbos before Pesach called Shabbat Hagadol. In the olden days, rabbis' tasks were far simpler than they are nowadays. And they weren't psychiatrists, social workers, mediators, arbitrators, entertainers, and so on and so forth. They were people who studied, and when people had questions in Jewish law, which they inevitably did because people had devoted their lives to living according to Jewish law, and you needed this scholar who was always prepared with answers or prepared to find answers for the very questions which make up the fabric of our life. Nonetheless, although they were not per se preachers, and the job of preaching was very often taken on by other people. Having said that, there were two times a year where typically the rabbinic contracts stipulated that the rabbi had to give a sermon, a drasha. One of them was the Shabbos between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, referred to as Shabbos Tshuva. And the other one, somewhat more famous in that respect, is the Shabbos before Pesach called Shabbat Hagadol, and sometime during that day it was expected of the rabbi to give a talk which actually was meant to be of a, so to speak, a legal nature, not primarily interpretive, because we wanted people to review these very, very important laws of this very important, but sometimes at least seemingly complicated holiday, depending on how far one wants to take it. And on the other hand, in order to make it something which would really cultivate the idea of Torah study in a more deep way, they didn't simply have dry halachot, dry laws, but rather they would try to deliver what is traditionally referred to as a pilpul, which is an interesting analytic way of presenting the law. And the way that pilpul works, generally speaking, or any kind of analysis of that kind, whether it's in Talmudic things or whether it's more related to strictly halakhic subjects, is to raise a question. And the actual question itself may not be earth-shaking in its consequences, but it gives us the pretext and the context to go through a variety of legal and midrashic sources, which in itself becomes a very important experience in preparing ourselves for the holiday. I don't know if I mentioned, when we open the laws of Pesach, the first thing we are told is that one should start studying these laws a month in advance. And immediately after that, the Ramoshe Isserles, who is the primary Ashkenazic decisor of Jewish law, writes that we also begin to take an interest in the subject, what is referred to as ma'ot chitin, which means money for buying wheat, because there's no question that every single Jew has to eat matzahs on this most important holiday, and this incredibly essential mitzvah. But maybe some people will not be able to afford it, or anyone can bake the wheat, but maybe some people can't afford it. So this mitzvah began as a form of making sure that those who are poor and needy would be able to have wheat with which to make matzahs, which on the one hand would enable them to fulfill the mitzvah of the night, and that on the other hand would ensure that they have something to eat. If not, at very least, they have these matzahs. But the term ma'ot chitim, literally means or money for buying wheat, evolved over time to generally the idea that it is our responsibility, our social responsibility, to make sure that those who are in need have the proper supplies so that they will not be hungry, that will not be cold, they will be able to also experience the joy of the holiday. Now, of course, one can say quite rightly, and indeed, Judaism emphasizes that the commandment to support the needy is all year round. But it takes on a special emphasis before the holidays. And that is for two reasons. First of all, the sense of lacking is much more painful at a time when everyone is supposed to be rejoicing, when others have and I don't. At the same time, as Maimonides writes, that the rejoicing is not complete if I feel someone else is lacking. So we both need this reaching out and helping others on a day in which we are required to feel joy, because the true joy cannot be experienced neither by the one that is lacking what he needs and even by those who have what they need, knowing that their brothers and sisters don't have it. Actually, quite interestingly, and of course we know, especially nowadays, it's become sort of almost fable that everything gets very expensive on Pesach, the special Pesach foods, which require special Pesach supervision, so there is a certain rabbi who in the drasha of Shabbat Hagadol emulated the style of the classic pilpul by trying to point out a seeming contradiction in two Talmudic sources and resolve them in a way that equaled an appeal to reach out and help others. He said we have one source that says every Jew has to eat matzahs on the night of Pesach. Every Jew has to drink 4 cups of wine on the night of Pesach. We have to have a sumptuous meal on the night of Pesach. We have to have bitter herbs, and so on and so forth. That is one source. Another source says, it's clearly written in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not steal. Now, those who do not have money cannot afford things. How are they able to achieve these things without stealing? Presumably they've tried to earn a living. They've fallen short. So he says the resolution to this seeming paradox can be resolved by us making sure those around us that they have what they need, that we awaken our social conscience before the Pesach Seder. And as a matter of fact, it is really on this note that the Pesach Seder begins, Kol Dichvin Yesiv Yechel, the very beginning of the Seder, practically at the start, before it officially begins actually, those who are in need, let them come and eat. The Khatam Sofer explains very simply, this is the first redemption of the Jewish people. We await anxiously, and during the Seder, this theme is also permeates the proceedings that we look forward to the final redemption when the Messiah comes, and that is why we end by saying, L'shana haba Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. And so, since the Talmudic tradition tells us that it is giving charity, helping the poor, that more than anything will speed up the redemption and the arrival of Mashiach, so therefore right at the beginning we say, whoever is poor, come and eat. That is the essence of the Pesach Seder. It also says that those that eat, come and let them celebrate the Pascha, the Pesach, and there it doesn't use the expression eating, and so the Khatam Sofer says we have two kinds of needs. We have people who have material lackings, and we need to make sure they have food. There are others who don't understand the significance of the holiday, and our job is to nourish them spiritually on this holiday as well. So that is how one rabbi did his drasha on a Shabbat before Pesach, and I would like to share with you a different idea, and it's upcoming in the next clip. Thank you.